these people who think they're so I don't know how to put it, but they think they're bad because they can throw a rock or they can throw a flame, a Molotov cocktail. They can pour gas on a car and then have somebody come behind them and light it. They think they're so tough, but when you push back on them, they crumble quicker than a toothpick or a card house. And that's what we've got to do, because last night when they started pushing them back, they'll turn and run. And that's what we've got to do.
I saw one scene that I think it was New York, and there were riots, and the people had gotten in the way, and a police car came up and just started running over them. And if they're blocking the way of a cop, then they got what they deserved.
I would love to see peaceful resolutions to everything. I just like Ronald Reagan said before, we will always strive for peace first. But when you go beyond where we can't handle it with peace, then we're going to come at you with the strongest stick or the biggest stick that anybody's got.
I think this is what Trump has said, and I guess the thing that really upsets me the most is just like you were saying. However, there was a guy on today that said all of the arrests in Minneapolis last night were from Minnesota. There weren't any, but we know they are obviously the thing that I can. In some sick ways, I can sort of understand protest in Minneapolis.
Right. I can too.
But Atlanta and Dallas and Philadelphia and across the country, that's just stupid. People looking for an excuse to get a new pair of Nikes, and that's just.
And apparently to go loot Targets. I don't know why Targets have become such a target, so to speak.
Yeah.
But it's no, I agree. And like I said before, I totally understand people wanting to gather and let their voice be heard. If you want to march, that's fine. You're protected by the Constitution. You can gather, you can assemble, you can protest, you can force your grievances to be addressed, but you cannot do it with violence. And you cannot break the law and then think the Constitution is going to have your back. Because just as the Constitution will protect your right to assemble and to protest, it will also protect the innocent and the private property from being damaged and destroyed. So when you want to protest, if you want to protest, that's fine. And everyone's going to be they may not agree with you, but they're going to, most people, especially on the conservative side, will fight, and many have died for your right to assemble and protest. But when that turns to violence and you want to smash buildings, you want to destroy business, and David, how does it make sense that people in their own communities want to burn their local stores down? Where do they think they're going to get the items that they need to live if they burn them down?
This really became apparent in the L.A. riots, when they destroyed, where they shopped, where they did everything, and it was years before they were able to come back. And, like I said, Forrest Gump, stupid is as stupid does.
Yeah, what I would love to tell a lot of these rioters and these violent so-called protesters is if it makes sense for you to go out and burn down your local stores and your local eateries and shops, then why don't you go burn your own house down?
Yeah.
I mean, it just as it doesn't make sense to come out and go, I'm so mad I'm going to burn my house or I'm going to burn my car. Well, it doesn't make it right for you to go burn someone else's. And this is the kind of stuff that I would have no tolerance for. I mean, these, they don't like governors or Trump. I would be much worse, because I would have never stood in D.C. and allowed them to get that close so they could deface the Lincoln Memorial or to burn a historic church. I would have had a SWAT team in every vehicle, maybe even some of the National Guard vehicles, to push forward with rubber bullets. I would have done everything first to be nonviolent, whether it be water cannons. And trust me, I know why they don't want to use water cannons, because they don't want the optics. But I'm sorry, at this point, I'd have the fire engines. We've got to get to a fire that you people started. You're either going to move out of the way or we're going to make a path. And I wouldn't have a problem with that, because if you treat these people with kid gloves, and I'm talking about the paid agitators, I'm talking about the ones who are strictly out there wanting to cause pain, they're wanting to destroy, and they're wanting to steal. I mean, these people, we have gone now 3 months or 3.5 months of being completely shut down because of a virus. We have businesses that are struggling to come back, even in places that they're not even allowed to come back yet. So we have businesses teetering on going out and never being able to come back, which means livelihoods are lost. And now we're supposed to stand back and allow Antifa and other agitators come in and just put the final nail in the coffin of these businesses. These are families. These are families who have kids. These are families who have generations. I'll give you an example. There's I cannot remember if this was in D.C. I think it was. There's a black man who was a firefighter who spent his life savings to open his business once he retired from the fire department, and they destroyed it last night. Now, are they proud? I mean, if this is supposed to be a white cop versus black victim, how in the hell do you go and burn down a black man's life savings? I mean, there's no excuse for that, and this is the kind of things that we have to stop. We can't allow this to keep happening, and I am thrilled that President Trump is going to, if he hasn't already, he's going to label Antifa as a domestic terrorist group, because that's what they are.
Well, he has, and he is
excellent.
He has sent out the force to start arresting them, and I think that's, whichever hole they're in, they're gonna be pulled out of that hole, and then this is the other thing that you brought it up a minute ago, or you mentioned it, is that one of our sayings here, and has always been one of our sayings, and this is true with any situation: follow the money. Now, there's one of those son of a bitches.
It's one of my favorite sayings
in the riots that's going to say, "Okay, I give up. I'll tell you who paid us."
Yep.
And then we should go after whoever's paying them with hell bent for leather and no excuses, no nothing. If you paid somebody to riot or to cross a state line,
right,
then
they truly do need to follow the money, David, because now there are reports. We're going to find out a lot, but there are reports coming out that there were bricks being delivered discreetly, being delivered and placed in certain places for the protesters, and there are gasolines being provided. These people who are out there aren't going to go spend, just as a Democrat isn't going to spend their own money, they want to spend your money. These protesters or these violent rioters are not going to spend their money to go get these tools of destruction. Somebody's providing it. And I would predict that we're probably going to find out that some of this is going to lead to George Soros. And if you don't know who George Soros is, look him up, folks. He's not a good guy, and not only is he known to pay for agitators like this. This is a man who gladly pays and funds Democrat candidates, and they gladly accept it. Now, maybe we'll talk about that on my show tomorrow. But to your point, David, follow the money, because there is a money source for these paid agitators going from state to state to really, really fire up this lawlessness.
No question. And it's they're going to find out who eventually. Yeah. And I think he's as guilty as the cop.
Absolutely. If you were found to be financing this kind of behavior, then absolutely you need to be held as a accomplice.
This brings up another point, in my opinion, and I'm drawing this from a friend of mine, but all of this is going on, and we know that even though coronavirus has put a hold on some of our athletes' paychecks and all this kind of stuff, and some of our stars and whatever. But where are our, Kaepernick's out there saying he supports the riots and all this kind of stuff. Why doesn't somebody put a sock in that son of a bitch's mouth? And where are all the other? There are a lot of good athletes. There are a lot of good everythings, you know.
Well,
and if they came out supporting, yes, I support a protest, but I don't support riots and violence. And you know that there are a lot of young people that are highly influenced by athletes and
too
stars.
Much, but yes.
Pardon?
Yeah, they're too much influenced by the wrong, to me, by the wrong idols. But
Yeah.
you're right. There's so many sports figures. Where are they? Even political figures. Where's Obama? Why hasn't he come out and said, "Hey, look, we can protest, and we know what was done to George Floyd was wrong, but let's band together and let's make."
Where was he for 8 years?
Well, you know, I'll get. That is definitely a topic that I'm going to touch tomorrow, David. And you're right. If it's Trump's fault that, because you'll hear this from people who who will sit back on their Twitters and their Instagrams, and they will support the riots and try to make excuses for the violence. Those people happily sit back and try and support and come up with reasons to support it. And then you can't help but ask yourself, well, look at the riots that happened in, I don't remember what year it was, but it was during the Obama administration. So what's the difference? If it can't be Trump's fault, because the same thing happened under Obama. The problem is we're allowing this lawlessness to happen. There are people paying for this agitation, and then we have governors and mayors who are too afraid to push back, and that's got to change. But where are the figures, like you mentioned, David? President Obama, what a great opportunity for him to come out and say, we are not doing justice for George Floyd or his family by destroying the community from which he was from. Where is Obama? He could do a good thing if he'd come out and say, look, I'll march with you guys if we do it in peace. But he doesn't have the gonads to do that, nor does he have the will, I don't think. But hey, that's just me. But there are other people that could do the same thing. Instead of sitting back on CNN or MSNBC but behind guarded walls, go and offer. If you're Al Sharpton or one of these media whores, go out there and say, I will march with you, but we're going to do it in peace. Set that example. And then they could probably influence enough of these guys to stop doing what they're doing, except, of course, the paid agitators who are trying to stir this up. That the only arresting these people, that's the only thing that's going to stop them.
And throwing away the key. You know, and like I said, I don't live in Atlanta and don't work in Atlanta, so I really had no reason to care one way or the other about our mayor or the mayor of Atlanta. But I do want to publicly say she seems to have done a very good job. And she came out and said, you know, this isn't the Atlanta of Martin Luther King,
right,
for anybody to riot or destroy anybody's property. And from what I understand, she's worked very closely with our Republican governor on bringing troops in, bringing the Guard in.
The National Guard.
And, you know,
well, good for her, because I haven't heard a whole lot of what she's done. I did hear that she seemed to once she saw, I guess, let's say, the brevity of the situation, she started reacting and saying, hey, look, we can't allow this to get out of hand, which I think it was allowed to get out of hand, but she did start, it seems like, working with Kemp and saying, all right, we're going to push back, and at least coming out and telling these people, look, you're being fools. You know, kudos to her for doing that. I hope she sticks to it, because we've got, I think, that Democrat Representative Ellis, who is trying to evoke Martin Luther King as if Martin Luther King would approve of this. And let me tell you something. Martin Luther King is rolling over in his grave at people who will invoke his name in the name of violence. And I think Bottoms, by using MLK from the point of, hey, peace protest, violence doesn't solve anything, then kudos to her for doing that.
Yeah, in fact, I watched her and on her news conference or whatever, and I must say I was impressed with what she had to say, and I hope the message got out, you know, to everyone. Now, there was...
I did hear that she said one thing that I think is probably going to go viral. That's pretty funny. I heard that she came out and in one of her statements and said, "Look, you fools," or I'm not sure the language she used. I'm paraphrasing, but she basically told all the protesters and rioters and the agitators that, "Hey, we have a pandemic going on. All you fools better go get tested."
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of funny, so good for her.
Yeah, yeah. And the other side of the coin is, I'm not even going to go there. That would only get
us in trouble.
Going the wrong way. Yeah, well, it's just going the wrong way.
Right.
We've made a lot over the years out of King, and his ancestry is still trying to ride the white horse as much as they can, and particularly an aunt or whatever she is. She's not a blood relative, but anyway, or I guess she is a blood relative, but a niece of his, and she rides it as far as she can, but she really doesn't. Seldom does she really have anything to say, but that's neither here nor there. The problem is today, and hopefully it will. I understood it spread to Buckhead last night.
Yeah, they were looting. I think Gucci and some of the, they figured out, hey, why don't we take this party up the road and go to where the high end stores are? So you've got protesters who figured, or I shouldn't call them protesters because these are just law breaking agitators and bad people, and looters, and these are criminals.
My thing is, you fire a warning shot, and you say stop. They keep going. You don't fire a second warning shot.
I got to tell you, the second warning shot ought to hit them. And again, I mentioned before, I'm fine with rubber bullets because I don't want somebody who's caught up in it to be hit and killed because of the idiot next to them that is the criminal. So I'm fine with going, because I will tell you, David, and I bet you know as well as I do, rubber bullets will put you on your, it'll put you on your rear.
Yeah.
And you hit somebody multiple times with rubber bullets, and they're going to think that they're bleeding out when they're just going to be bruised. But it will work. And now I do think when I say go in using rubber bullets, I mean have the rubber bullet weapon and have the live weapon. Because when you go in and you're taking these out, the ones who can't take the message from the rubber bullets and they throw a fire or rocks and they start using violence, then you take those down, because you can weed out the criminal element. Because unfortunately, there are people getting caught up in this that, again, they're being paid to cause problems, but a lot of these are teenagers and a lot of young people who clearly don't understand where the line is of what's lawlessness and what's not. And I want them all arrested. I think there's a good way we could do it with a good show of force that would be non-lethal. And you won't hear me talk about using non-lethal ways against the criminal element very often. But in this case, when we've got people that are getting caught up, and this is the problem, David, too, with these agitators, they immerse themselves in a crowd so it's harder to pick them out. And you'll see it if you watch the footage. You'll see people walking around, maybe people filming, and then you'll see a guy come up in the crowd and he tosses the gas or he tosses the cocktail. So it makes it complicated, but we've got to push it back and stop it. There's no doubt.
And the other, I was very impressed, and I've been sitting here since you mentioned it and trying to think of where it was. It may have been Philadelphia, but it was a Target store, and the local neighborhood encircled it and said, "You're not going to, you're not going to destroy our store." Mm-hmm. And and I kept thinking, I could see me going to something like that, but I'd also have another problem, is that I'd be armed.
Oh, absolutely. I got a story for you, David. I think this happened in California. It might have been Santa Monica yesterday. But there was a business. There was, I believe it was Santa Monica, and these agitators and criminals were going down store by store and busting out the glass so people could loot. And there were a man, I believe it was a man and his sister, so brother and sister, stood in front of their business and said, "Not this one." Actually, I don't even think they owned the business. I think they were just there going, "Look, we can't be doing this. You shouldn't be doing this." And they protected one business. And when they were approached, I think the girl was thrown on the ground. But the guy, I believe, and I haven't verified this, but what I'm told is the guy said, "I'm armed, and you're not gonna bust up this business," and they went away. They skipped that one. So we need more and if you remember, David, you mentioned the LA riots. You remember there were Korean business owners that stood at the top of the rooftops of their buildings, armed with rifles and pistols, aimed down, and hey, if you're not breaking in this business, I will protect my property. And it worked, and that's something that we're probably going to have to do as well. I will tell you, I would, like you, I would be happy to go and help protect. If it makes it out to, now I do live close to the city, and Buckhead, I'm right next to it. So, yeah, I'd be one. I've got some. I wouldn't do it without being armed. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, I also heard I'm not sure where they were talking about, but to me it's a good idea. It's just like, we do a lot of veterans shows and deal with a lot of veterans, a lot of guys that have served, and I don't know of one that, in myself included, that wouldn't jump back in if we were asked. We're not going to be asked, but the point of the story is one of the guys today on Fox said, we ought to call up all the retired police officers and see if they want to come back and assist the whatever city they were working in, and see if they want to come back for a month or 2 months or whatever.
That's a good idea.
It's like, I personally don't have a problem calling out the Guard, and as I was in the Guard and in the Army Reserves, but we have some riot training and all of this, but they're not trained like police are, and good cops. But and I'm always concerned that somebody's going to push a guardsman too far, and we'll have a whole nother situation.
Right.
And
which is why I mentioned the non-lethal weapons, because they're rubber bullets and beanbags from a shotgun. When you get hit by them, you don't really know that they're not non-lethal. But I agree, David. And what I mentioned before, what I'd like to see is use the armament of the National Guard. And what I mean by that are the armored Humvees and the vehicles, the armored vehicles, that those can be used to get through a crowd. You're not going to set one on fire. You're not going to break the glass, because these riders who are out there, which I think a lot of them are snowflakes, because they think they're going to get a free rein to be tough, and they're running up and smashing a car window. You're not going to smash an armored vehicle's window like that. And when they run up we could use these as a barricade to push back, and then have the police come in behind those, and then have the National Guard be the last, the last thing that would need to be used. Those men and women. But we could use the officers. We can use, every federal agent in every state. If you're a DEA agent, or you're an FBI, Secret Service, Marshal Service, you're a federal agent. You have the right to arrest anyone in any state if it's a federal crime. And rioting and what's going on right now, and you're across the state line to cause problems and cause a riot and to loot, it's a federal crime. At least I'm pretty sure it is. So they can arrest, and so I would use the law enforcement first, but I would use the vehicles of the National Guard. Let these National Guards guys push these people back.
I was again listening to the news last night, and they were talking about the situation at the White House, and there's always, you've got the lead car whenever the president goes somewhere, and he's in the big limo and all this, and then you've got the Secret Service and in or not in Humvees, but in SUVs.
Armored
behind,
SUVs.
Yeah, behind, and they were talking about in the one right behind the president that they have basically a Gatling gun.
Oh, they do. It's I cannot remember the millimeter gun. If locked and loaded with Roger B, we'll have to ask him tomorrow. But I have seen this vehicle, and they've got what most people would think maybe would be a pop-up sunroof. But when that sunroof opens, and it's the coolest thing in the world, man. It looks like a Gatling gun basically, but it'll come up and out with the shooter, and that thing can fire. I can't tell you how many rounds in seconds. So yeah, it's now
I just thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, it is. They do protect. There's a reason they're tasked to protect the president, and they will do it at all costs.
And this is something that again, Sandy Bostic, that's our agent in charge here. He was an agent, and he knows that stuff, and he was called into duty many times to, and you hit a nail on the head. He was in Homeland Security, but the Secret Service can pull out people and use them if there's a special something or the other, and so he's gone through all of that, and he was a special agent in charge in Moscow. And when President Trump before President Trump was president, he did the Miss Universe contest, and he was there. So our agent in charge has a very career, Sandy Bostic. He's an interesting guy to talk to, and we got to teach him to stay out of holes. He broke his foot.
Apparently, gardening for him is much more aggressive than when I'm out in the yard trying to help a garden.
But anyway, so we are going to get Sandy's opinion on all of this, and find some. He'll give us some inside information of what like President Trump said. Had anybody breached the fence at the White House, they would have been met by some rather nasty dogs, and and I know that they're, it's crazy what the media will harp on, because they're giving Trump all kind of, now it's they're going to accuse him of being racist and everything, but a child of God for that, but. I don't care if it was Obama behind those walls, if it was Jimmy Carter. It doesn't matter who is behind those walls. If you breach the fence of the White House, then I don't want to hear you complain, because breaching the walls of something like the White House, you're going to pay the consequences. And you're most likely going to be first met by a pretty nasty bite, and then you're going to be met by something much worse than that. So yeah, if these, if people are that dumb and they want to go breach the White House because they think they're getting a free reign right now, let me tell you something. If you're a protester out there who's listening right now, I doubt that we have many.
And yeah, I thought we do too. But if you want to be violent, or if you know one that might want, and you think because you're getting a free reign, don't test the Secret Service. These guys are not your run-of-the-mill law enforcement. They're not controlled by a mayor. A Democrat mayor cannot tell the Secret Service to stand down. That's not going to happen. So if you want to push your luck with storming the White House, well, it was nice knowing you.
Yeah. Now they're very well trained, and they, interestingly enough, we all take the same oath. They took the same oath that anybody going in the service takes. And then they take an oath on top of it to protect the president. But they are highly trained, be it female or male.
Right.
They are highly trained.
Unbelievable training. And like I said, they don't care who the president is.
No.
And look, folks, you've got
unless they're Democrat FBI that happen to care.
That's a whole nother. You know what? It's good that you mentioned that, David, because the men on the ground, your agent, who has to bear the brunt of protecting and actually facing the danger, These aren't the guys that were at the upper echelon sitting in their offices planning a coup, which was the Comeys and the Strucks. And so, yeah, unfortunately, we had some bad apples. But see, that's a perfect example also, David. We aren't perfect. Human beings are not perfect. We're not infallible. And you can take a great organization like the FBI, where 99% of the people are great people, but that 1% bad apples, the Comeys, the Strokes, the Pages, the McCabe's, they're bad apples. And you know what? We're weeding them out right now. Same goes with any police force. There are millions, David, there's got to be millions of police officers across this country.
Oh, yeah.
And 98 or so percent of them are great people. But 1% can really do some bad things, like the cop that killed George Floyd. But that police officer represents a small, tiny amount of the police force. When you look at the number of police officers throughout this country, I mean, to try and turn all police into bad people is just, and that's where these rioters and these agitators want to go. It's sad to see, and again, needs to be stopped because there are good people out there.
You know, the thing that well, I have two things that are always on my mind that I don't believe any of our representatives in Congress should be there that haven't served in the military at some point or the other. Mm-hmm. Oh, and that was a thing I was thinking about too, and I'll never be able to find it out, but it would be interesting to find out how many of the agitators, protesters, rioters, or whatever served in our military. I bet the number would be less than zero. I would
have to agree with you. The agitator, the bad elements, the rioters, the criminals, the looters, I can't imagine any of them to have served and stood for the flag. And these people are out there.
They're garbage.
You know, this is another point. This is something I'll get into tomorrow, David, on my show. They are garbage, and these people run around calling themselves anti-fascist. They are the epitome of fascism. And this just clearly shows that they have no idea what they're saying, what they're doing, or at least what they don't know what fascism means. And they call Trump a Nazi. They call him a socialist. They call him overbearing. They're calling him a tyrannical leader. They call him a king. When they're burning the flag, the American flag. They're not burning the socialist flags. They're not burning the Nazi flag. They're not burning the Chinese communist flag or North Korean communist flag, the dictator flag. No, they're burning the one flag that stands for freedom, liberty, and individualism. They're burning that flag. So clearly, these people, they when they try and act, and they get in front of the media. CNN loves to get, and how crazy is it that CNN, who helps build these people up, get the brunt of the downtown Atlanta, the CNN building, just got pummeled. They must really be. I can't imagine how CNN feels right now, but going, hey, we propped you guys up. Why are you turning on us? Because if they could get away with saying that, I'm sure they would. I wouldn't be surprised if there were CNN people outside the CNN building going, why are you, we're with you.
Yeah.
So it was almost poetic justice. And I hate to say that because I don't, look, I would stand up for the CNN building just as I would for any private property. But I can't help but notice a little poetic justice there because CNN and MSNBC and these operations, they build up this monster that has now turned their rocks and their Molotov cocktails on them. So it's crazy to see, and it just drives me nuts. But you're definitely right there, David. We have these rioters who in the name of so-called anti-fascism, they are the fascist. And to burn the American flag, the one flag that stands for freedom and liberty, it just makes no sense. In fact, how many of these protesters or rioters and criminals and agitators, how many of them realize if we were a fascist regime, if we were a communist regime,
they'd be dead.
Those protests would have lasted about 5 minutes, and they would be dead. Talk to anyone from the Tiananmen Square. Talk to anyone about that. Tanks were there to roll over people. I would love for one of the CNN reporters or MSNBC, when you're out there talking and elevating these rioters and let them spout total BS, why not question and ask them, do you realize if the United States was what you say it is, you would probably be dead by now because your little riot would have lasted all of 5 minutes?
They don't understand it. They don't know it. They wouldn't believe it. And, and that's why Soros or whoever that's paying for it hires bimbos to do it.
Yeah, unfortunately, the uninformed and David, you mentioned that probably not the smartest people. You're right. And unfortunately, I think that's by design, just with our education system. We're not teaching. How many, you said it just now, when I mentioned Tiananmen Square, how many of them actually know what that is? Probably most of them don't.
No.
Because they're
no
not
idea.
taught. Yep.
And that's sad because we're watching history repeating itself, but it's on our soil.
Yeah.
And
it is.
The like you said earlier, and I said, and we all agree, stop it and stop it immediately.
Yeah.
And I don't really care what city it is. If they haven't been under siege yet, then they should be prepared. And where I'm from, we had a situation, and I won't go into any details, but it didn't ever get out of hand because our city police chief at the time, they did call up the guard, of which I was in, and we were prepared, but the chief of police, and I keep trying to remember his name, and it fails me. But anyway, we knew that outsiders were going to be coming in, or he knew, and so we had a fairly good-sized canine corps to begin with, and he stationed a cop and one or two cops and their dogs at the airport, at the bus station, at the train station. Mm-hmm. And when somebody that looked like they might be coming in to cause problems got off the plane or train or bus or whatever, they met them with the dogs and let the dogs bark a few times. And it was amazing how fast those people turned around and got back on the bus.
This is not my stop.
They didn't like the idea of facing the dogs. And I can remember what he looks like, but I can't remember his name. But and this is, he didn't do anything wrong, the police chief. He just greeted them to the city of Lubbock, and they got the message real quick. So there were no riots. There was no reason that the guard went home that night. And you have to face force with force. That doesn't mean that you overdo it. You just
You just got to be
prepared.
David, that's a good point. And I think more cities, governors ought to stand up and say, "Hey, not in my state." And even the people. Let's say we, the citizens of let's say Georgia, for instance. Let's put the message out. Hey, not in our state. If you want to come and be peaceful, I will stand with you. I may not agree with you, whatever your cause is, but let's just take the George Floyd. I will stand with anyone who wants to bring awareness of the wrongness that was done to George Floyd. I would come and stand with anyone. I don't care what side of the political aisle you're on, because there isn't politics with what happened to George Floyd. It was a bad cop, call it bad training, call it overzealous, call it just a bad dude that killed George Floyd. And I don't care what side of the aisle you're on politically. I'll stand with you if you want to do it peacefully. because justice will be brought for George Floyd. And in fact, the officer has already been arrested. He's charged with several charges, and that's just the local charges. This officer is going to be charged with federal crimes as well. It will happen. And the wheels of justice may not turn as fast as you want them to, but they will turn. And there's no problem with peacefully protesting to let Minneapolis know and let the federal government know we want to make sure something gets done. So we're going to stand and unite and peacefully tell you and let you know this needs to be addressed. And then maybe we can have forums to address the problem of maybe how do we weed out some bad apples. All of that stuff I can stand with. But if you want to turn that into an excuse to destroy property, to steal, to put people's livelihoods in danger, no, not going to allow that, not going to stand for that. In fact, I will stand against you 100%. And I think that's the message, David, that would be great if we would have governors come out and go, the minute this turns violent, we will turn on you with the force of the law. And
I was just thinking, though, your girlfriend, Pelosi, and
we broke up a long time ago.
And some of the others that are so knowledgeable, and I use that word very loosely, that stop the selling of military equipment to cities. They're paying for it now.
Under the Obama administration.
Yeah, and this is what, if the police had the equipment. I mean, back then when they stopped this, it made it sound like a city was buying an APC to go joyriding in.
Right.
And it's just crazy. Yeah. And if a city can afford to buy a piece of military equipment, why shouldn't they have it? And this is the perfect situation. When it's needed, where is it? Mm-hmm. And and they kept saying, oh, if cities buy military equipment, we're going to have a police state.
Well, the funny thing is, this is how, call it ironic or call it, just strange, I guess. But when a Democrat screams about a police state, oh, we can't arm police officers with what they need so they can show a deterrence, because that'll lead to a police state. We have one party in this country that has been pushing for a police state for years, and it's the Democrat Party. And again, not to make this all political, but you can't escape that fact. So when a Democrat comes to me and tells me, oh, we can't arm police officers with military-grade equipment because then they can turn and be used as tyrants, as a police state. Well, show me the states right now that are using their police force to be a police state, to hold people in lockdown in their homes and won't allow businesses to open because of a virus. They're sidestepping the Constitution and turning their states into police states. That's been the states of Michigan, Illinois, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Maine, Oregon, all Democrat states. So maybe this will be a topic tomorrow on my show, but David, it's a good point. We had in the Obama administration where they stopped the sale of heavy equipment and military grade equipment to local police municipalities because they said, oh, that will be too aggressive. That'll be too much of an aggressive look. Well, you know what? The use of force, we hope, never happens. But criminals need to know that if you're going to come and destroy with Molotov cocktails and rocks and anything, other weapons, bats, batons, you're going to be met with bigger force. And the police force is the police force. And this also leads me to what I talked about before, David. It matters who we elect. Because for every police force, there's a chief. And for every agency, there's some type of political official or someone put in charge. And those people matter. Because we need to have a police force that can react to criminals and to a criminal element and to agitators. But we also have to have them be policed themselves. And the only way to do that is to have good, honest people elected who are heads of these agencies who can weed out the types of officers that we saw put his knee on George Floyd's neck. And so we don't need to disarm a police force, but we need to weed out the bad guys, and that can be done. But we've got, as people, as citizen voters, we've got to be able to put the right people in office and be willing to remove the bad people from office. An example I could give is the DeKalb County, here locally, the DeKalb County Sheriff. We've had to remove, the previous sheriff went to jail. And now we've got an interim sheriff who's already been accused of doing some pretty bad things or some wrong things. And now we're coming up on an election. Again, it's the people, the citizen voter, that needs to put the right guy in charge or right woman in charge. So it gets to be as simple as that, David.
You got it. And, people can blame themselves for not getting the right people.
Right.
And if, it's like the old saying, you can't complain about the politician if you didn't go and vote.
If you didn't go and vote, yeah.
And,
yeah.
I don't...
I agree with that 100%. And
oh, I do too.
And that's the... As a voter, we have such a responsibility. And you need to go out. But if you're going to go be an active voter, then you need to be an informative voter.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely.
So, because people say, why don't you tell everyone to go vote? Well, because not everybody should vote, including dead people. Dead people shouldn't vote. But yeah, it's I would love for people to be more informed, and yeah, not everybody's going to vote how I think they should vote, but you know what, we've earned the ability and the privilege to vote, and we have that great document that allows us to control all the fools that are our representatives, and we've just got to be willing to be an informed voter.
Well, this has been fun, and also,
it has been.
I wanted to basically let people know where the station stands, and and how we all feel about it. And it's like there are a lot of cliches and a lot of whatevers, and this is the epitome, like I said, of Forrest Gump. Stupid is as stupid does, but it's also a situation where there are two wrongs don't make a right.
Yeah.
And we certainly have two
basic
wrongs
stuff
here.
You should learn as an elementary student.
Yeah. And one reporter was making the point, and I totally agree with him, that with our modern technology today, we should be able to and can pretty well identify any and all that have been involved, and face recognition and all of this. And I'm for going after them personally. If it's sort of like the cops last night. If they've imposed, if the mayor has imposed a curfew for 8 o'clock, then the streets other than cops should be clean. And no ifs, ands, and buts.
Yeah.
You're on my street after 8 o'clock, you're going to jail. Simple as that. Victor, thanks for coming in.
Absolutely.
And this has been, I hope some people have appreciated it, and we'll play it again in a few hours, and we'll just go from there, folks.
Absolutely. And be sure to tune in tomorrow. We'll have more.
We'll have more. And we've got land surveying coming up very shortly, so stay tuned for Jeff and the land surveying show. We'll be back with him right after this.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.